Chapter 1. The birthday dinner he forgot. The clink of cutlery echoed against the silence. Ruoxi sat at the candlelit table, her fingers curled gently around the stem of a wine glass. Across from her, the seat remained empty, perfectly arranged, untouched, as if mocking her hope. The restaurant was one of Qin Yuhan's favorites. Discreet. Elegant. She'd called in advance, asked for the table by the window, overlooking the city skyline he loved. She even wore the dress he once said made her look decent. Not beautiful. Never beautiful. Just decent. Her phone buzzed at 8:12 p.m. Yuhan. Something came up at work. Don't wait. No explanation. No apology. No call. Just a message. Brief and clinical, like every exchange they'd had lately. She stared at it for a moment longer than she should have, then turned her phone face down. The waiter returned, politely unsure whether to clear the second plate. She gave a small nod. It's all right. He won't be coming. The waiter hesitated, sensing the wound behind her smile, but said nothing as he removed the untouched steak and poured her a refill. Ruoxi took a sip of her wine. It was dry. Bitter. Like all the things she had quietly swallowed for the past 3 years. When she arrived home, their home cold and dim, his car was already in the garage. For a fleeting second she hoped he'd returned early. Maybe he'd feel guilty. Maybe he bought her flowers. But the sound of laughter upstairs shattered the thought. High-pitched. Familiar. Ruoxi's hand froze on the stair rail. She knew that voice. Sulin. She climbed the steps anyway, each footstep heavier than the last. From the crack in the study door she saw them. Yuhan seated beside the piano, Su Lin perched close, her fingers dancing over the keys like whispers. He was smiling. Smiling. Ruoxi stepped back, silent as a ghost. In their 3 years of marriage she had never once seen him smile like that at her. Later that night he entered their bedroom long after Su Lin had gone. You're still up, he said flatly. I waited, she replied, voice barely above a whisper. He unbuttoned his shirt, not meeting her eyes. Something came up. With Su Lin. His hands paused. She met his gaze. Did you forget what today is? Silence. Ruoxi's lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. It's okay. I forgot a long time ago too, what it feels like to be remembered. He looked at her then, expression unreadable. But whatever words he might have said, he didn't. He just turned away, climbing into bed, back facing her as always. That night Ruoxi stared at the ceiling, her eyes dry. No tears left. She had loved Qin Yuhan for 3 years. Loved him through his indifference, through the shadow of a woman he never let go of. And somewhere between waiting and enduring she had disappeared. But something shifted in her chest now. Quiet. Subtle. Like the soft snap of a thread stretched too long. She didn't know it yet, but that moment was the beginning of Chapter 2, The Ghost Between Us. The morning sun spilled through the sheer curtains, casting pale gold across the room. Qin Yuhan was already gone. Ruoxi sat on the edge of the bed, still in her nightgown, the imprint of last night's silence wrapped around her like a second skin. She reached for her phone instinctively. No missed calls, no texts. Not even a belated happy birthday. It shouldn't have hurt anymore. But it did. She made her way into the bathroom, twisting the tap as her fingers brushed against a small glass vial on the sink counter. A perfume bottle. Delicate. Expensive. Definitely not hers. He picked it up. Narcisse bloom. Su Lin's signature scent. Her throat tightened, breath caught somewhere between rage and heartbreak. The scent lingered on the towels, in the air, as if Su Lin had pressed herself into the walls of this house, leaving no space for Ruoxi to breathe. Ruoxi stared at her reflection. Her face was calm, but her eyes looked like they were waiting to be forgotten. Downstairs breakfast was untouched. Yuhan's coffee cup sat empty, the news murmuring on low volume from the sleek kitchen tablet. The normalcy of it all was maddening. She picked up her handbag, slipped into her heels and left without a word. At the office. Ruoxi wasn't supposed to be here. She had stepped away from her editing job 3 years ago when she married Yuhan, pushed gently but firmly into the role of a CEO's wife. Silent, supportive, invisible. but she still had friends here. Ruoxi. The receptionist blinked in surprise. We haven't seen you in months. I'm meeting Lin Jiao for lunch, she said smoothly. Just stopping by. Lin Jiao, her old work friend, one of the few people who hadn't disappeared after her marriage. They met at a nearby cafe, where the food was forgettable and the conversation sharp. You look thinner, Lin Jiao noted. Marriage diet? Ruoxi forced a smile. You could say that. Lin Jiao hesitated. I saw a photo of Qin Yuhan at that charity gala. He was with Su Lin. Ruoxi stirred her tea. She's back. And he's still? He never stopped. Silence. Lin Jiao reached across the table, her voice gentle. You don't have to keep living like this, Ruoxi. Love shouldn't feel like erasing yourself. Back home. Ruoxi returned home to find Su Lin's shawl draped over the back of the living room couch. She didn't touch it. Didn't cry. She simply walked upstairs to the guest room and sat on the floor beside a dusty bookshelf. Years ago she'd tucked a letter behind the books, a wedding card from her mother filled with hope. He may not love you now, her mother had written, but sometimes love is planted slowly. Be patient, Ruoxi. Let it grow. Ruoxi touched the card's faded edges. She had been patient. She had waited. 3 years of quiet birthdays. Empty anniversaries. Smiles met with indifference. And still she waited. But now Su Lin was here. Not as a memory. Not as a shadow. As a ghost, flesh and blood, haunting the very halls of her home. That night as she passed Yuhan in the hallway she paused. You should tell her, Ruoxi said quietly, that her perfume doesn't suit our bathroom. Yuhan stopped. His eyes narrowed slightly. You went through her things? She left them in plain sight. She's just visiting. Ruoxi met his gaze, a flicker of strength breaking through. She never really left, did she? He didn't answer. And she didn't wait. She turned and walked into the guest room, closing the door softly behind her. That night, Yuhan stood outside the closed door for longer than he meant to. He didn't knock. But he didn't walk away either. Chapter 3. The choice he already made. The gala was the highlight of the season. Flashing cameras, glittering gowns, whispered gossip behind champagne flutes. It was a night meant to celebrate the launch of a new subsidiary under Qin Group. And yet all eyes turned to one thing. Or rather one couple. Qin Yuhan arrived with Su Lin on his arm. Ruoxi watched them enter from the top of the staircase. Perfectly poised in her own designer gown, one Yuhan's assistant had selected for her. Su Lin was radiant in scarlet, an intentional choice, bold and unforgiving. Her arm clung to Yuhan's as if it had always belonged there. Ruoxi descended slowly, smile pinned in place like glass. She was as always the wife in name only. But tonight the farce played louder than ever before. In the receiving line the whispers started before Ruoxi even reached them. Isn't that his wife, Liang Ruoxi? Why is Su Lin here then? Poor thing, just look at her. Ruoxi kept walking, spine straight. Her heels clicked against marble, every step echoing the reminder. You are invisible. You always have been. Ruoxi, Yuhan greeted her coolly when their eyes finally met. His voice was polite, empty. Formal. Su Lin smiled sweetly beside him, resting her head on his shoulder like they were at a private dinner, not a public event. You look lovely tonight. Red might have suited you better though. Ruoxi's smile didn't waver. And yet here we are both wearing masks. Yuhan's brow twitched just slightly. But he said nothing. She stood beside them for exactly 5 minutes, long enough to be photographed and forgotten, then slipped away toward the back garden. Out under the moonlight she finally let her expression fall. The stars were hazy tonight, and the wind carried the scent of night-blooming jasmine. She leaned against the railing, letting her breath catch up with her thoughts. 3 years of loving a man who refused to look at her. 3 years of swallowing pain dressed as poise. Tonight it felt like her final humiliation. You don't have to stay, came a voice from behind her. Ruoxi turned to see Chen Wei, dressed in a crisp suit holding a drink. I didn't know you'd be here, she murmured. I wasn't planning to. But someone told me the prettiest woman in the room would be here, so. She gave a quiet laugh. Still smooth. He looked at her softer now. Ruoxi, I saw them walk in. And I saw how you looked when they did. I'm fine. You're not. And you don't have to be. She shook her head. It's my life way. I chose this. Even if it feels like I didn't. No, he said quietly. You just accepted it. That's different. Back inside, the crowd clapped as Su Lin took to the stage to perform a piano piece. Her dramatic return, of course. Yuhan stood at the front, watching her like a man lost in time. Ruoxi watched him. That was when she knew. The choice had already been made. Not tonight. Not recently. But long ago, in the way he looked at Su Lin like she was both beginning and end. Ruoxi was just the middle. When she returned home that night, she walked into the bedroom they no longer shared. And she packed a single bag. Not because she was leaving yet, but because she needed the reminder. One day soon I will. Chapter 4. I'm not her. It rained the next morning. Not the soft drizzle of spring, but a hard, drumming storm that blurred the city skyline and turned car horns into distant echoes. Ruoxi sat by the window, fingers wrapped around a cup of jasmine tea. She hadn't slept. The bag she'd packed still sat in the corner of the guest room, half-zipped, like a decision half-made. She heard Yuhan come downstairs at 8:03 a.m. like always. His movements were efficient, quiet, predictable. For a long time she had found comfort in that routine, believing that someday she would fit into his life the way he fit into his schedule. But now she saw it differently. She wasn't part of his rhythm. She was just background noise. He stepped into the dining room and paused at the sight of her. You're up early. I didn't sleep. Silence stretched between them like the gulf they never crossed. He poured his coffee. Black, 2 sugars. She had memorized it the first month they were married. You left early last night, he said, not quite looking at her. I didn't want to interrupt, she replied. You seemed absorbed. His jaw tightened faintly. It was a public event. And Su Lin's performance was very public. Now he looked at her. Are you jealous? Her laugh was soft and cold. Of what? A memory I was never allowed to compete with. She stood walking past him. You know what the worst part is? He didn't answer. It's not the late nights. Not the silence. Not even the perfume she leaves in our house. She stopped beside him, eyes searching his unreadable face. It's the fact that you don't even realize how much you've hurt me. Yuhan finally met her gaze, something flickering beneath his cool exterior. I never asked you to love me. No, she said quietly, you didn't. But I did anyway. She stepped back. And you gave all of yourself to someone who left. While I've been here the whole time. Invisible. Later that day she went to the old publishing house where she once worked. It was small, warm, cluttered with books and forgotten coffee mugs. And somehow, it felt more like home than the cold, pristine mansion she shared with Yuhan. Her former boss, Mr. Zhou, was surprised but pleased to see her. I thought you'd vanished into the world of luxury housewives, he teased gently. I almost did, she smiled. But I think I'm ready to come back. If you'll have me. That evening, Yuhan returned home late. The house was dark. For the first time in a long time he noticed the difference. Her presence was always quiet, but now her absence was louder than anything. He found a note on the dining table written in her familiar script. Don't worry. I haven't left yet. I just needed to remember who I was before I became your wife. I'm not Su Lin. And I never will be. That night, Yuhan stood outside the guest room again. The door was unlocked, the bed untouched. But she wasn't inside. And for the first time he wondered, had she started slipping away long ago? Had he already lost her without realizing it? He didn't sleep either. But unlike her, he wasn't used to feeling empty. Chapter 5. A life without him. The first morning she returned to the publishing house. The scent of ink and old paper wrapped around her like an embrace. Ruoxi stood at her new desk, a modest corner space next to the window, and placed a small potted plant on the sill. A white lily. Simple. Quiet. Alive. Back from the dead? Lin Jiao teased, dropping a manuscript onto Ruoxi's desk with a grin. Ruoxi smiled. Something like that. She ran her fingers over the manuscript. The words on the page pulsed with emotion, with life. It had been too long since she felt like she belonged to something more than silence. Here she wasn't a title. Not a wife. Not a shadow. She was a woman with stories in her hands, and the ability to choose her own. Meanwhile at Teen Group, Yuhan's office was quiet. He had read her note over and over, each word sinking deeper into the place he didn't like to name: guilt. I'm not Su Lin. And I never will be. He stared at the screen in front of him, but the numbers blurred. He couldn't stop thinking about how she looked the night of the gala, dignified, silent, and so alone. And how he'd let her walk away again. Yuhan. Su Lin's voice snapped him out of it. She stood in his doorway, elegant in a cream blouse and pencil skirt, the picture of someone who belonged. He straightened. You didn't call. I figured I didn't need to, she smiled, walking in. I brought lunch. She placed the bag on his desk, sitting down casually. Her perfume, narcisse bloom, filled the room. He inhaled sharply. He thought he liked that scent once. Now it felt like something foreign. They ate in silence until Su Lin spoke. You're distracted. He didn't deny it. It's Ruoxi, isn't it? Till he said nothing. She's not like us, Su Lin continued carefully. She was never meant for your world. She's my wife, Yuhan said finally, his voice low. Is she? Su Lin looked him in the eye. You've never treated her like one. He flinched but didn't respond. Su Lin softened. You always wanted comfort, Yuhan. And that's what she gave you. But now you're realizing comfort isn't the same as love. He stared at his half-eaten lunch, appetite gone. Su Lin's words lingered in the air like her scent. Later that night, Ruoxi sat at her desk, sorting through submissions when a message popped up on her phone. Yuhan, you're working again? She stared at it for a moment, surprised. Then typed simply. Ruoxi, yes. I am. A minute passed. Yuhan, you didn't say anything. Ruoxi, I didn't think it mattered. No reply came. She turned her phone face down and returned to her work, heart calm for once. That night, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror and unwrapped a new lipstick. Nothing bold, just a soft rose pink. She'd always worn pale shades before, thinking Yuhan preferred subtlety. But now she chose the color for herself. It wasn't a declaration. It was a beginning. Back at the mansion, Yuhan entered the house and found it quieter than usual. No scent of dinner. No soft music. No warm light waiting for him. Just absence. He wandered to the guest room, but the bag was gone. She hadn't left. But she wasn't waiting either. And for the first time he realized he might have to earn her now. Chapter 6. The slow realization. The Qin residence had never been loud. But now it echoed. Every room held a faint outline of her. Ruoxi's folded blankets in the guest room, her tea mug still in the cabinet, the faint lavender scent clinging to the hallway curtains. But the woman herself? Gone in all the ways that mattered. She still lived there. But she no longer waited for him. Yuhan didn't know when it had begun to bother him. Maybe it was the morning he came down to an empty dining table. Or the day he passed her in the hallway and she didn't even pause. Maybe it was when he noticed she no longer looked at him with longing. She didn't look at him at all. At the office, Yuhan stood at the boardroom window, watching the city blur beneath his thoughts. Qin Wei entered behind him. Su Lin just confirmed she'll perform again for the company's anniversary gala. Yuhan nodded absently. Also, Qin Wei hesitated. I saw your wife yesterday. Yuhan turned. Where? The old publishing house on Huaihai Road. She looked good. Pause. Happy. A flicker of something sharp twisted in Yuhan's chest. She's working again. Qin Wei raised an eyebrow. Did you expect her to sit at home forever? No answer. Instead, Yuhan looked out the window again, jaw tight. He remembered the way she used to wait up for him, how she always noticed when he forgot to eat, the way she remembered the anniversaries he never acknowledged. And now, she lived a full day without him. And never looked back. Ruoxi's new world. Ruoxi was laughing again. Not the polite kind she had perfected during gala seasons or family dinners, but a soft, genuine laugh that came from her stomach and surprised her co-workers. Who knew Mrs. Qin had such a sharp tongue? Lin Jiao teased as they sorted through submissions. Not Mrs. Qin, Ruoxi corrected gently. Just Ruoxi. She didn't notice how often she corrected that now. Her world was becoming hers again. Fully. Word by word. That evening she got a message. Yuhan, are you coming home tonight? She stared at the text, heart still for a moment. Then replied, Ruoxi, I'll return when I'm ready. And for the first time she silenced the conversation instead of waiting for his reply. Back in the mansion. Yuhan stood in the kitchen staring at the message. He felt unsettled. Not because she was gone, but because she wasn't hurting anymore. He had always assumed her love would be enough to keep her still. To keep her his. But now she was moving forward. And he was stuck in the ruins of his own detachment. That night he passed by the empty guest room. The light was off. But he noticed something on the nightstand. A pressed flower between two sheets of paper. Something she'd once placed in a book he'd never bothered to read. He picked it up, holding it like a relic. And finally, he whispered the truth into the silence. I didn't realize I could lose you. Chapter 7. What do you want, Qin Yuhan? The sound of rain on the cafe windows muffled the city's noise. Ruoxi sat in the back corner, nursing a cup of black tea, edits spread across the table. She had learned to like the bitterness, strong, simple, honest. She had just marked a paragraph with a red pen when a shadow fell over her table. She looked up. Qin Yuhan. For a moment neither of them said anything. He looked tired. Like someone who hadn't slept properly in days. The perfect suit, the polished shoes, they were all still there. But the mask he usually wore was cracked. He cleared his throat. Can I sit? She gestured to the empty chair. It's a public cafe. He sat. She didn't offer to order him anything. I saw your message, he began. Ruoxi said nothing, fingers gently flipping a page. I shouldn't have let it get this far. She finally looked up, gaze cool and unreadable. It was always this far. You just noticed late. The words hung between them, heavier than they sounded. I miss you, he said quietly. You miss having someone at home, she corrected. You miss convenience. You miss my silence. What is it you actually miss, Qin Yuhan? He looked at her, frustration and something deeper behind his eyes. I miss you, Ruoxi. The way you look at me. The way you used to smile. The way you always loved you, she interrupted. Blindly, endlessly. Even when you treated me like I was just furniture. Yuhan flinched. Ruoxi leaned forward, voice low. You were in love with a memory. I was in love with a man who wasn't looking at me. Do you know what that feels like? To sit across from someone every night and still be invisible. I see you now, he said. A beat passed. He smiled, small, sad. But I've already started seeing myself. Later that night, Ruoxi walked home alone. The rain had stopped. Her umbrella dangled at her side. The encounter had shaken her, but not in the way it once might have. She didn't cry. Didn't question. Didn't replay every word. Instead she whispered to herself. I deserve more. Meanwhile, Yuhan's office. The flower from her book still sat on his desk. He stared at it for a long time, then opened the drawer and pulled out a file. Liang Ruoxi, Employment History Education articles published. He had his secretary gather it 2 days ago. Not because he wanted control, but because he was starting to realize he didn't know the woman he married at all. She wasn't just the quiet one. He had dreams, talent, passion. And for 3 years he had reduced her to the role of wife, and failed even at honoring that. He picked up his phone and typed, Yuhan, can we try again properly? Equals. It sat unsent for a full minute. Then he deleted it. Not because he didn't mean it, but because he knew now. It was no longer his move. Chapter 8. An offer, a door. The publishing house buzzed with excitement that morning. A prominent literary agent from Singapore had just offered to feature their next anthology on an international platform. And Ruoxi's recent article, The Unseen Wife, had sparked unusual attention. Mr. Zhou caught her by the coffee machine. "You're being noticed," he said, smiling. "And not just here." He handed her an envelope with the official seal of Eastbridge Literary Society. A guest editor position. 6 months. Singapore. Ruoxi blinked. "Me? They liked your voice. Your honesty. They want your perspective." Her fingers tightened around the envelope. A door had just opened. That evening, she walked through the park near the mansion. Once again hers, but no longer a cage. The willow trees swayed softly as dusk crept in. She sat on a bench, staring at the offer letter in her hand. 6 months. A clean break. A chance to rewrite everything. Her phone buzzed. "Yuhan, dinner tonight? I made your favorite. Just talk. No expectations. Please." She stared at the message. Then at the offer again. She could feel the weight of her old self. The woman who waited, who longed, who needed to be wanted. But now that version of her had stepped aside. At the mansion. He opened the door before she could knock. Ruoxi stood in the entryway, a quiet force in a light gray coat, the envelope still tucked in her purse. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Yuhan said, stepping back. "I wasn't sure I would either." He led her inside. The dining table was set. Soft music played. Her favorite jasmine rice porridge steamed gently in ceramic bowls. He pulled out her chair. "I remembered," he said, almost shy. She sat but didn't touch the food. "You remembered a lot lately." He looked at her, eyes not pleading, just present. "I've been trying." "I know." A long silence followed. Then she said softly, "I got an offer. A position. In Singapore." His hand froze halfway to the wine glass. "For how long?" 6 months. "And after that?" She smiled faintly. "I don't know. That's the point." He exhaled, slow and deep. "I want you to go." She looked at him, startled. "I want you to go," he repeated. "Not because I don't want you here. But because I want you to choose whatever you want now. I don't want to be another reason you stay small." Her heart squeezed painfully. "Yuhan. I didn't know how to love you," he said. "But I know how to let you be free." And maybe that was love now. Not a cage. Not a vow repeated blindly. But an open door. Later that night when she left, he didn't follow her. He just watched from the doorway as she walked into the night, head high, steps certain. In her purse was a plane ticket. And in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Chapter 9. 6 months apart. Singapore. The air in Singapore was different. Warm, salty, alive. Ruoxi stood on the rooftop of her temporary apartment, the skyline glittering around her like an ocean of stars. It had been 4 months since she left Shanghai. 4 months since she left Qin Yuhan. And she had not looked back. Not because she didn't care, but because she finally cared for herself more. The guest editor position had become more than just work. It was reclamation. Every day she read stories by women who dared to dream, who bled into pages, who dared to leave something behind. And slowly her voice grew bolder. Sharper. Freer. She published her first solo column, "A House is Not a Home When You're a Ghost in It." It went viral. But more importantly, it made her seen. Meanwhile in Shanghai, Qin Yuhan sat in a half-empty boardroom, staring at a mock-up of the company's rebranding campaign. He'd stopped staying late. Stopped sleeping in the office. He didn't call Su Lin anymore. Not since she moved to London for her solo show. He walked home now. Cooked even. Sometimes badly. Once he made Ruoxi's porridge just to remember how it smelled. And he'd stopped deleting his texts. "Yuhan, I read your column. You're incredible. Yuhan, I'm trying to become a man worthy of the woman you are now." Yuhan. No pressure to reply. "I just hope you're smiling more these days." She never replied. But she read every one. And saved them. 5. Ruoxi was invited to speak at a literary forum. She wore a navy blue dress, her hair in a low twist, and her voice didn't tremble as she stood before a crowd of 200 strangers. I spent 3 years loving someone who didn't see me, and then 6 months learning to love the version of myself that I had forgotten. The applause was real. So was the tear that slipped down her cheek afterward, because she finally felt whole even without him. 16. A familiar number lit up her phone. He stared at it for a moment, then picked up. Hello. Johan's voice was quiet. You're coming home soon. She exhaled. That depends on what home means now. There was a pause. Then he said, let me show you what it can be. Not what it was. Her silence wasn't uncertainty. It was reflection. Because for the first time she had a choice. And she wasn't afraid to make it. Chapter 10, If You Still Want Me. It was raining again. Shanghai always seemed to greet pivotal moments with rain. Not the stormy, dramatic kind, but a soft drizzle, like the city itself was holding its breath. Ruoxi stood outside the gates of the Qin residence. Umbrella in one hand, suitcase in the other. She hadn't told him she was coming. 6 months had passed. She was no longer the woman who begged for love. She had seen the world, found her voice, and built something without him. But her heart, it had never fully let go. Inside the mansion, Johan stood in the kitchen stirring a pot on the stove. His movements were calm, methodical. Routine had become his anchor these days. Every Friday he made her porridge. Even though she hadn't been home in 181 days. He never stopped. Just in case. The doorbell rang. He froze. Half a heartbeat later he was at the door. And when it opened, there she was. She looked different. The same woman, and yet, not. More confident. More radiant. Someone who had been through a storm and built a garden from it. Hi, she said simply. Johan stared at her, stunned. Then whispered, you came back. Ruoxi met his eyes. I came back for me. Not for the old life. Not for the marriage we had. I came to see if there's something new worth choosing. He swallowed. There is. She stepped inside, closing her umbrella, droplets trailing behind her. I don't want promises, she said softly. Not pretty words. I want effort. Truth. I want to be seen every day, not just when I leave. I've changed, he said. Not perfectly. Not instantly. But I've learned how to love you without breaking you. Show me, she said. Later that night, they sat on the living room floor barefoot, bowls of warm porridge in their laps. The fireplace crackled. Johan took a small box from the coffee table. I had this made, he said. Months ago. I wasn't going to give it to you unless you ever came back by choice. He opened it. Inside was a ring, not flashy, not ornate. Just a delicate band etched with the words, if you still want me. Ruoxi stared at it, heart tight. And then, smiled. I do. The book. 1 year later, Ruoxi published a best-selling memoir titled, Unwritten Vows. On the dedication page it read, to the girl I used to be. You deserved more. And to the man who learned to see me. Thank you for choosing me when I finally chose myself. Bonus chapter. The Home We Made. The morning sun poured into the living room, dappling the wooden floors with gold. Ruoxi was curled on the couch, a worn paperback in one hand, her glasses slipping slightly down her nose. She hadn't written anything in months. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she was finally living the story she used to dream about. From the kitchen came the sound of sizzling eggs and quiet humming. Johan. Still a terrible singer. Still trying. She smiled. A small voice piped up from the hallway. Mama, where's Mr. Bun Bun? Ruoxi looked up just in time to see a tiny whirlwind burst into the room. Bed hair, mismatched socks, and a floppy-eared stuffed rabbit clutched by one leg. In the laundry basket again? She asked knowingly. Her daughter, 4 years old and stubborn as both her parents combined, huffed dramatically. Bun Bun's scared of the dark. He needs pancakes. Ruoxi laughed. Then you better go rescue him. Daddy's making pancakes right now. As the child raced off, Ruoxi stood and walked into the kitchen. Johan looked up from the stove, apron dusted with flour. She's convinced Bun Bun has opinions on maple syrup, he said with a grin. Ruoxi leaned against the counter, watching him with quiet affection. Well, he does live in this house. He flipped a pancake and caught her gaze. The love in his eyes was no longer hidden, no longer tentative. It had settled, deep and steady. I booked the tickets, he said, placing a pancake on a plate. 3 days in Kyoto, just us. Your mom's already agreed to take care of her. Ruoxi raised an eyebrow. No laptop. No laptop. She tilted her head. And no guilt. He walked over, placed the plate in front of her and kissed her gently on the forehead. No guilt. Just the life we chose. That afternoon. In the backyard, their daughter ran barefoot through the grass, chasing butterflies. Ruoxi leaned into Yuhan's side as they watched her from the porch swing. Do you ever think about the past? She asked softly. Every now and then, he replied. But it doesn't hurt anymore. She nodded. Me neither. They sat in silence a while longer. Two people who had broken, healed and returned, not to where they started, but somewhere better. Together. Not out of habit. Not out of guilt. But out of love. Final lines. In the end, it wasn't the pain that defined them. It was the choice to stay, after choosing themselves. And in that choice they found everything they thought they'd lost.